The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
The race for a spot Bitcoin ETF in the U.S. is in full swing, with TradFi giants from BlackRock to Fidelity refiling their applications with the SEC. Joining us now to discuss is the Chief Investment Officer for Bitwise Asset Management, Matt Hougan. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Jen. It's good to be here.
It's great to have you here. Now, Bitwise re-upped its Spot Bitcoin ETF the day after BlackRock submitted a similar application. But in March, you told pensions and investments, that you didn't currently see a path forward for Spot Bitcoin ETFs. What changed?
Yeah, I think a couple of things have changed. One, you've seen continued maturation in the general crypto market. So the CME strengthening its role as a significant market, and other maturation with more volume shifting onto responsible exchanges like Coinbase. And then secondly, just as a realpolitik thing, you have to listen when BlackRock comes to the market. They're the largest ETF issuer in the world. They're very careful. They're very connected. And I would be lying if I didn't say that that was an important signal as well. Bitwise has been committed to bringing a spot Bitcoin ETF to market for 4 or 5 years now. We're committed to being amongst the first pack. So those two factors are what changed the game. And we're now optimistic there is a pathway forward.
You mentioned BlackRock being very connected, obviously the largest asset manager in the world. There's been some speculation that maybe BlackRock knows something the rest of us don't. What do you think?
I don't think there's any behind the scenes smoke-filled room message passing. What I think is that BlackRock has extremely large resources and extremely well considered people who are focused on this, who have been working on this for a number of years. There's definitely talk in the industry of the discussions that BlackRock had, not with the government, but with other players in the space over the preceding months. So I don't think there is any backroom deal at all. I just think they've been evaluating this for years. They've been serious about this for years. Remember, they pulled Bitcoin into the Aladdin network a year or so ago. So they've understood that Bitcoin and crypto is an important space. They've been working on it. And I think they just figured the time was now. Maybe the Grayscale lawsuit played into that, but I don't think there was any special information passed.
Do you think the timing, you say the time is now, but we saw the SEC sue Binance and Coinbase days before BlackRock filed this. Why do you think the time is now? It feels very counterintuitive.
Yes, there's certainly issues in the crypto market, and I think we're all hoping for those issues to resolve. But importantly, those issues didn't focus on what's going on in the Bitcoin market. And I think in the eyes of the SEC, there's a major difference from Bitcoin. They've articulated this difference and the rest of the market. The other reason it's different now, which I mentioned earlier, but I want to anchor back to, is a big part of the ETF approval is the CME Bitcoin futures market being a regulated market of significant size. And if you think over the course of the last year, we've seen increasing volumes, increasing open interest. We've seen Bitcoin futures ETFs trade successfully on the market for nearly 2 years now, tracking that price with great fidelity. And I think those are real world examples of how the sort of institutional arm of crypto has leveled up and become more important, even as regulators are cracking down on the worst sort of excesses of the retail aspects of crypto. And I think the SEC is willing to separate those two and make an evaluation on the facts.
Now, the surveillance sharing piece of these ETFs have become a real talking point. The NYSE ARCA filing for Bitwise's proposed trust doesn't explicitly say whether it's entered into a surveillance sharing agreement with a crypto marketplace. Is that coming?
That's correct. Obviously, I can't speak to what's in the filing beyond what is specifically in there. I will say that I think the most successful, the successful spot Bitcoin ETF application will need to include multiple pieces of analysis, including analysis focused on the CME market. Obviously, surveillance sharing agreements are an interesting idea, but I think it's going to be a holistic approach. And that's certainly the approach that Bitwise is taking.
I think I know your answer to this question based on your last, but I got to ask, Coinbase is listed as the Bitcoin custodian for BlackRock's proposed ETF. Do you have a custodian?
Obviously, as you guessed, I can't speak to what's in the filing beyond what's in the filing itself.
All right. Report from JP Morgan came out this morning, and their analysts are saying that the ETF is not going to be a game changer for crypto markets here in the US. Of course, we've seen ETFs launched in different countries. What do you think an ETF would imply for crypto markets?
Yeah, I saw that report. I think the JP Morgan crypto analysts are exceptional analysts, but I think they may be missing the boat here. For one, I'd point out that the largest Canadian ETF has $600 million in AUM, and the US is 30x times the size of that market. So you could scale that up. That's a significant impact. But there's also a critical difference between the US ETF market and markets in Canada and in Europe, which is that in Canada and Europe, there is not the financial advisor marketplace dominating the ETF space the way it is in the US. In the US, one of the major user groups are financial advisors who control something like $20 trillion of wealth here. That doesn't exist in other markets. We think those are the first adopters of a spot Bitcoin ETF, and that is a gigantic pool of capital that right now has a hard time allocating to this space. And once there's a spot Bitcoin ETF, it will be push button easy. So I don't think there's a one-for-one comparison between Europe, Canada, and the US. They're just very different ETF markets. I do think a spot Bitcoin ETF is a game changer in the US. I think it's a phase shift. I think it's a sign we're entering the mainstream cycle of crypto, and we're really excited about the prospects of potentially bringing that forward.
And lastly, I have to get your reaction. We spoke about Coinbase being tapped for the surveillance sharing agreements. As we mentioned earlier in this interview, Coinbase is being sued by the SEC. What do you make of all of these asset managers tapping Coinbase for this?
Look, Coinbase is a fantastic publicly traded company with a decade-long track record of serving customers well. They're a regulated custodian. They are one of the custodians for Bitwise's other funds. So they're a fantastic partner. I'm not surprised at all to see the largest asset managers turning to them. They're one of the most trusted and trustworthy brands in crypto. And that extends beyond these lawsuits, which will take multiple years to play out, which in my view will likely be solved by new legislation and new clarity of legislation. But regardless, it doesn't change what's going on with Coinbase Custody, which is just one of the most trusted and trustworthy brands in the market. I think they will be a huge winner from the spot Bitcoin ETF race, however it shakes out.
All right, Matt, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great weekend. That was Bitwise Asset Management Chief Investment Officer, Matt Hougan.